Hey guys, it's camera review for Fosse Verdon, episode 7 nowadays, and as usual, I was very much looking forward to this episode, as I am with every episode in this show. And I really didn't know where they were going to take this show into for the last two episodes. I knew obviously it would be Chicago heavy, but I didn't really know what else we were going to do. And I have to say that while I did enjoy this episode, this was really the first episode of the show that I wasn't totally in love with. There were definitely a lot of things to like here, for sure. Don't get me wrong. This is not at all a bad episode of TV. It was just the episode overall, it felt a bit messy to me, and I'll get into why, but we're just getting into right now. So while the last episode and episode 4 focused very heavily on Bob Fosse, this is the this is the significant like Gwen Verdon episode. Like this is really the big episode where we really get into Gwen's perspective. We get to see things through her eyes, and I really love that. I like that we got to get an episode, pretty much about her. We did get it in episode 3, but this was even more. Even that one was more an abridged version. This one felt very Gwen heavy, and I definitely really did appreciate that, especially when it comes to the Chicago stuff, because, now Bob, he's recovered from the hospital, he's out of there, they're making Chicago, but immediately you can tell that Bob is being very controlling. He seems to be focusing on Cheetah. He really loves how talented Cheetah Rivera is, which, I mean, yeah, Cheetah Rivera is very talented, but Gwen was the person that coaxed him into doing this. This has been a project that these two have been working on for a very long time, and right from the beginning, you can just tell he's not really doing things in favor of her. He's not really treating her like the way he should in that way, and you can see Gwen throughout this episode getting more and more visibly hurt, especially when it comes to the song he eventually adds for her of Nowadays, which, originally it's supposed to be a Roxy Hart only. That's the only person that's supposed to be singing it. It's supposed to be Gwen's song. But right at that moment, Bob decides to just make it a duet for no apparent reason. He just thinks it'll be better as a duet. Now, obviously, we've seen Chicago, so yeah, he was right about that, but he was wrong with the way he treated Gwen here. I mean, he did not treat her very well here at all. He just treated her like she was another actress, and, considering that Gwen, again, the two of them have concocted this idea for a while, he should have treated her with a lot more respect. And that moment where she finally just gives it to him, I absolutely loved. I love the moment where she basically says, like, I didn't have to say yes to Damn Yankees. I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to say yes to this production. And Gwen is right. A lot of Fosse's success have come from her. Sure, Bob has done some things on his own, like Lenny, and eventually he'll do all that jazz on his own, but a lot of the productions, it's been Gwen that has helped him. When he was doing Cabaret and he was a little bit lost, who did he call to help him so he had his ideas, fully intact? That would be Gwen. When Sweet Charity was going on, he couldn't figure out where it was going wrong with that. Who'd he call in? He called Gwen. So that moment where Gwen is, calling him out for just completely just making her fade into the background and kind of ignoring her, you really do feel it. And Michelle Williams, I mean, oh my god, she is just so good in this role, and I have to say, if she does not get nominated for an Emmy, I mean, I don't know what's wrong with the world, but this should be the episode that she submits, without a doubt. I think out of all the episodes, this was easily her strongest acting-wise, and moments like that, you can just tell this is something that Gwen has been holding in for a while, and I've said this, like, Gwen has felt this way for a very long time, but she's just not going to take the abuse anymore. She's not going to take him pushing her around, and I really love that moment where she finally calls him out for his bullshit. And look, again, you can say that some of Fosse's success, yes, it hasn't been completely because of Gwen, but a lot of it, she's been the one to instill a lot of hope in him. She knows, what drives him creatively, and that's something that she does care about, and she's done all she can to really support him. Hell, she's the one who even pitched this idea to him. She visited him in the hospital, and he should be treating her with a lot more respect than he is, and I thought that moment was very well done, and I really liked the way that was acted. Like I said, Michelle Williams acted the hell out of that scene, and I love what we got there. But things really come to a head once the reviews for Chicago come out. And as we know, they were kind of scathing. Chicago was not the show that was loved today. This was the 1970s version, keep in mind. This is not the one that came out in the 90s, which basically saved that show from just falling into oblivion. If it wasn't for that revival, I don't think Chicago would be really that well known at all. I mean, sure, the songs and things like that would probably be celebrated, but the show itself, I don't think people would really hold to that high of a standard, because back then the show just was not loved all that much, and you really do see that here. And there's that moment where, you know, he's reading the reviews and everyone's telling him not to get to him, and then Gwen suddenly, she has to have this voice surgery, so she can't talk for a very, she can't talk at all. He has to get Liza Minnelli to go on in her place, and you know, Gwen is, she's fine with that at first. You know, she's kind of, you know, she's fine with that. There's not much she can do. But then you see what Bob ends up doing, where basically every single critic, you know, wants to come in there. They've already reviewed the show, but because Liza's there, they want to do it. Bob seemingly says that he can't get rid of them, but they review the show and they think it's much better. And Bob's response to Gwen, regardless of if he thought she was good or not, was completely disrespectful to her. I mean, when he basically tells her straight out, like, you know, when he basically tells her that the critics loved the show with Liza more than they loved it with you, and things like that. I mean, you can see how hurt she is by this. This was their baby. This was something that the two of them were supposed to create together. It's something that they've been working on for 10 years now, and they finally had the rights to it. And you can see that Gwen finally thought all of this was going to work out. All of this was going to fall into place. But of course, it didn't happen. It just made her finally come to her senses and realize, you know, who Bob Fosse really is and how careless of a person he really is. And look, he can say whatever he wants, but clearly he did not care that much about Gwen, especially considering the fact that most of the time in this episode, when he's supposed to be focusing on her, he's focusing instead on many other actresses, many other people that are just not very important at the moment at all. He's focusing on Debbie Allen throughout a lot of the episode and flirting with her, and you definitely do see that here. And in general, I thought they did a really good job with just showing how marginalized Gwen really does feel here. I mean, she's taken this far too long. You can see that Nicole's words are starting to have an impact on her. She's starting to realize that, yeah, I am just another woman to Bob Fosse. We don't have that relationship that I thought we did. In that moment where she basically says to him, like, you know, he's never cared about her and he never really wanted her to be in the show. You can just see, like, it's her finally coming to that realization. It's very sad to see because, you know, I do think that Gwen very much cared for Bob. I do think that she wanted to help him, but at the same time, Bob was not that nice to her. Bob did not give her that respect that she really did deserve, and you really do see that here. And I think that moment, I mean, Michelle Williams, again, just acted the hell out of that scene. I love the way that was done, and it was a really great way to end at least this part of the episode, the moment where she's looking at herself in the mirror, realizing, you know, who she really can be. You know, she can still be a star. She's trying to be on without Bob Fosse. It's very effective, and I also like that you see Anne is not really okay with this either. She sees the abuse that Gwen is getting. She sees how Bob is treating Gwen, and I think Anne does have a level of respect for Gwen. I think that conversation that those two had, it has had an impact on Gwen. She hasn't really felt the same since they've had that conversation. You definitely do see that here. I mean, throughout the entire episode, trying to get Bob to eat, trying to get him to focus, but she's realizing that he's just not doing that. I mean, at this point, Bob, he's not even afraid of dying. He has the conversation with Patty where Patty's like, you know, if you die, I'm going to give the worst eulogy in the world. And Bob just does not seem worried. He seems completely unscathed by the idea of him just dying at the moment. And you see that he just doesn't care. And again, I thought they did a really great job with showing that. The moment with, again, it's finally Gwen, you know, all alone, her realizing that she can't rely on Bob anymore. It's a sad moment for sure, but it definitely was a long time coming, and I really did like the way that was done here. So all of that stuff I thought was brilliant. I love the way all that was done. So what I have a problem with in this episode, pretty much everything else. I thought that the rest of this episode was quite messy. Look, I get what they were trying to do, that because they did something with Bob where, you know, he's in this, like, fantasy sequence and things like that, he's picturing everything as the musical that he's doing. Sure, I get that, but for Gwen, I don't think it worked quite as well. I don't understand why we had to have everything in this Chicago-type aesthetic. I didn't understand the point of it. Her being the, you know, the whatever it's called, like the host or whatever of Chicago. I just did not see the point of this. I get it that it's supposed to be like inner monologue for her, but I just did not see the correlation between the two, and it just didn't really work for me. It's the first time, really, where I saw an artistic decision the show made, and it just didn't work for me at all. I did not see the point of this. And also, as much as I did appreciate the flashbacks in this episode, which I thought were really well done, I like the way they were contrasted, with what was going on. Us seeing the abuse that Bob gave towards Gwen. We saw that these two did not really have that great of a marriage. I mean, even when these two are together, Bob is flirting with another woman. He is talking to another woman, and just right then and there, when Gwen sees him, he proposes marriage. You see that he's just kind of doing this because he has to. It's his way of turning her into this star. It's his way of using her. And right when, we first see they weren't able to conceive a child, and things like that, I just don't really understand why it needed to be here. Look, is it important? Yes. Did it need to be in this episode, though? I don't think so. I feel like if you were going to do this, this should have been in episode 2 or 3. This late into the season, it just felt jarring. It felt very jarring to get flashbacks when it really has not been that consistent in the show. I've said it before. If the show was going to do flashbacks, it should have done it throughout the show as opposed to just a random episode. I get, again, what they were trying to do. They're trying to relate what Gwen is going through in the present day and showing that this is not, anything unique. This is abuse that she has endured throughout the years, but we've already seen examples of that. They should have sprinkled that throughout the show rather than have this really weird cut from the celebration of Chicago at the Tonys to this cut of them as a younger couple. It just didn't really work for me that well. I did love the moment, though, where, even when Gwen is pregnant, the first thing that Bob says to her is it my baby? That's how little he cares about her. That's how terrible of a relationship this really was. And you really do see the toxicity there. And that Bob really was never that respectful towards Gwen. He never really gave her that love that she really does deserve. It's very sad, but I like that we got to see that here. It's finally stripping away and taking away that sort of, that sort of veil that Gwen has maintained. She's had this mentality that her and Bob have had this special relationship, and we've seen that that's not really the case. Sure, artistically they do, and I do think that I'm pretty sure they did remain friends even after this confrontation, but things were never really the same between them, and you definitely do get to see why. I mean, Bob was not a good person. He did not give Gwen the credit or respect she deserves, and we definitely do get to see that here. So again, I thought that stuff was good. The moment with her and Joan, which was really cool again to see Joan one last time, where they both are having babies, it's good stuff. I don't see how it factors into the episode. I don't really see the point of it here. I feel like it should have been in a different episode, and just overall, it just made things a little messy, and it made the episode honestly feel a bit underwritten at times. It felt like in the present day, they didn't have a lot of story to tell, so they tried to cram all these flashbacks in here, and I just don't think it worked very well. I think they could have structured this a lot better, and for me, that was the biggest problem with this episode. Just structurally, it didn't work. Also, music-wise, it really didn't work. Razzle Dazzle in particular was very puzzling to me. Look, I understand that the context of Razzle Dazzle is that it is them trying to romanticize their relationship. I get that, but there wasn't anything they were lying about. Have you ever been in an adoption agency? Like, you're gonna try to make yourselves look as good as possible so you can get that kid. At this moment, they didn't know if they were gonna be able to conceive, so they're doing whatever they can to have a kid. So I don't really see the correlation between Roxy lying about murder and, why she murdered this guy in Chicago, and then Gwen and Bob trying to adopt a kid. It just didn't really work. I mean, again, Michelle Williams, phenomenal, great singer, really recaptured, Gwen Verdon very well here. But to me, it just didn't really work. The only musical performance that really worked for me in this episode, because a lot of them I did find quite superfluous. We both reached for the gun. It was good, but I feel like you could have cut that scene out, honestly. There just wasn't... I mean, besides the fact that, again, he is very much focusing on Cheetah, there just wasn't really a lot going on within that particular musical sequence. The Nowadays sequence, on the other hand, they did a great job with the recapturing. It was basically shot for shot, remake, and they did a very good job with that, and that's something I was overall very impressed with. I also do feel that, similar to the last episode, some aspects of this episode just felt a little bit rushed. It was a little unclear where we are. Obviously, we had those, those time cards and things like that. But I just think we needed a little bit more with this. And again, it's mainly due to those flashbacks. There wasn't a lot going on in the present day because of those flashbacks. It was like half of this was the present day. Like, I'd say 20 minutes of this episode was the present day, and then the rest was flashbacks, and then the weird artistic shit with Chicago. And I don't think it all blended that well. I feel like if we would have just devoted this to the present time, and Gwen realizing, what she's done, and Gwen realizing that, Joan and Nicole and all those people are right, then I think we could have had a really great episode here. It's still a good episode. It felt a little undercooked for sure. So, and also, I will say, the only other flaw I have is that we really have pushed Nicole to the background. And look, I'm not saying that Juliet Brett is bad, but I'm still feeling it's still jarring to see her. I don't feel like she's bringing a lot to the table. I feel like Blake Blaumgartner just was a stronger actress for me. She brought something to the role that Juliet Brett is just not giving us right now. And maybe it's that Nicole just did not have a lot to do this episode, but I just felt a lot more attached to that, this is the younger version of Nicole, than I am the older one. I feel like the younger version, they did a lot more with her. They showed how she felt left out. She felt alone. She had this very non-existent relationship with Fosse. He didn't really want to raise her as a child because he didn't want to abuse her, we saw, and things like that. She frequently smoked to blend in with the adults, but here, we're just not getting a lot with her, and that was a little disappointing. Overall, this was a good episode. I do think it is the weakest of the season. Like I said, it's the first episode that I wasn't totally in love with. I love the stuff in the present day. It's just the artistic choices coupled with the flashbacks, which really just did not feel like they need to be in this episode. Overall, it just made this episode feel a little bit more messier than others, but I still did enjoy this episode at the end of the day, mainly because of the performances, mainly because of the story they're telling here, the story of Gwen finally coming to terms with the fact that Fosse was emotionally abusive and finally getting herself out of it, finally calling him out for his bullshit. Those moments were very satisfying. And again, Michelle Williams especially deserves all the credit that she has gotten. And I really do hope that at the end of the show, she definitely does get that credit for sure, because she definitely does deserve it. But overall, I did really enjoy this episode. And I am going to give Fosse Verdon, episode 7 nowadays, overall, a B. So overall, guys, in my review of this episode of Fosse Verdon, let me know what you guys saw this episode raw, left your thoughts on it. We have one episode left, guys. I can't believe it. I really don't know. I'm assuming a lot of it's going to be all that jazz, because it has to be. I mean, that's really the only thing left they have to cover. We've gotten all the Chicago stuff out of the way. It's really just all that jazz that we need to see, and I am so excited to see the way they pull that off. All that jazz, as you guys know, it's one of my favorite movies. It really was the most personal work that Fosse did, and I can't think of a better way to end this show, so I really do hope they pay tribute to that well. But either way, guys, for this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys saw this episode overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
How can they see with sequins in